Hi, my name is Michael Sahno. I'm Jewish and I love Israel. So if you love Israel, if you love being Jewish, or if you have an unwavering connection to the land of Israel, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the 12 Cities in Israel podcast. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? My name is Michael Sahno, and welcome to the 12 Cities in Israel podcast. Hey, if you are a first-time viewer of this podcast on YouTube, hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell so that you get a brand new episode brought to you every week. We release them on Sunday, and they're there for you on Monday. And if you want to download it, you can download it on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and on Spotify. And we have... All right, so this episode, I think this is episode 60. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But this episode is going to feel like it's a little bit all over the place. And it's going to feel like it's not necessarily tied in to Israel, but it absolutely is. And I'm gonna let you know why it is immediately. Well, one of the reasons why it is immediately. And the initial reason is because I had the awesome opportunity to get on the phone on a video chat on WhatsApp with Professor Rivka Carmi, the former president of Ben Gurion University, the renowned geneticist, and she is also a medical doctor, and she is just a rock star on so many levels. And she's also just a really great, nice person. But she is an example of the wonderful kind of people that Israel produces. The reason I was talking to her and the reason why I gave her a call was because I am... Personal journey sounds kind of hokey, but whatever. I'm conducting a little 4-week experiment. So I was reading this book, and it was about changing your life, and it was by Deepak Chopra. Am I saying that right? I think I am. And he's an oncologist who is also... he's from India, and he applies a bunch of his traditional healing techniques in conjunction with his his medical practice. Actually, I'm not sure he has a medical practice anymore. Not because it went away, but just because he was devoting his time mostly to this thing. If I'm saying it wrong, I'm saying it wrong. It's called Ayurveda. But the bottom line is, it's not so much the Eastern practice that is the focal point of the book. The focal point is this breakthrough in medical... It's weird. You would call it medical philosophy, I guess, right? Philosophical medicine. And it is the mind-body connection. And I don't mean the hokey San Francisco of the late 1960s, mind-body connection, man, you just got to feel it. I don't mean anything like that. I mean in the literal sense of the connection between the mind and the body. One of the examples that I remember from City College in New York, when I was in one of the many psych classes. I'm a psych minor. And I'm thinking about maybe going back to school and finishing that psych degree. I already have one in Jewish studies. But one of the things that I found in one of the studies in one of the classes was that, and I think it was cognitive psychology, or maybe it was neuropsychology. But basically what happens is you can have an individual who is a runner, okay? He runs a marathon. He runs the 500-meter dash or whatever. And he can run through, or she can run through their event in their mind and if they're hooked up to an EKG and all the a blood pressure machine and all that stuff, what you'll find is that their physical response is the absolute same, data-wise, as their physical response when they actually do the event in the real world. So doing it in your brain equates to, on some levels, maybe not with everything, but doing it in your brain equates with doing it in the real world. So what I decided to do was I wanted to develop this way to change my behavior, to lose some weight, to be more active, to be more fit, and maybe open some expression in my DNA. Well, I don't know. Basically what I wanted to do was I wanted to see as if I could subconsciously train my mind to be the way that I wanted it to be. Thin. So I came up with this an acronym, HHLM, and HHLM stands for happy, healthy, lean, and muscular. So I have this mental concept of what I personally want to be. That's all well and good. Everyone kind of has that mental concept, but there are negative stressors that get in the way of that. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to reach out to Professor Carmi and find out on a genetic level, is this something that's possible? And it's really interesting because I was talking to her about, I think it's a 2013 study where they had a group of mice and they released the scent of jasmine, and then they were on a plate, an electrified plate, not a horrible, super like frickin' Rikers, ride the lightning kind of electric, just a quick bzz, like if you put your tongue in a 9-volt battery. So what they did was they released the scent of jasmine, and then they shocked these rats or mice, and they were like, okay. It was part of another experiment. What they found, though, is when the offspring were used and they were trying to recreate the same exact experiment, as soon as the scent of jasmine was released, the offspring mice responded. So there's genetic coding that's transferred onto from the parent to the offspring, and it opened up like this huge like waterfall of ideas that I had, and one of them had to do with a lot of readings. See, it's funny, we're going back to my college education here. One of them went back to my Jewish studies classes, and it was one of the Holocaust. I think I took 3 Holocaust courses to learn more about the Holocaust. And one of them dealt with the survivors' children. And I'm curious if these children were born after the Shoah, are they psychologically scarred? Was that psychological scarring transferred to their offspring? And that's something, I mean, you can't ethically test to find out if that's, I don't even know what genetic markers you would look for, but it puts into perspective the things that we do to an individual get passed on. And it's funny because, and I don't go into the Torah or anything, really around here, because I like to keep it open for everyone. Religious and secular. I will talk about religion in the context of history, in the context of the state, in the context of culture and tradition, but I don't really get too deep into my beliefs. But the interesting thing is, in the Torah it says it will be passed on, this curse will be meted out on you and your children and your children's 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 and on and on and on for so many generations. And we actually do impress that trauma onto our generation. So it's just fascinating. And that was a little bit of a, what is it? I got off onto a little bit of a tangent, but it's one of the see, that's the interesting thing about the Jewish experiment, the Jewish experience. I'm talking about too many things all at once. I'm talking about my experiment. I'm talking about the experience. So yeah, so that's one of the interesting things about when you look at the Jewish experience, how it tends to interact with so many different aspects of society and culture worldwide. So I got onto the phone with her, Professor Carmi, and I was telling her about my idea and about, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put HHLM, happy, healthy, lean, and muscular, up everywhere. I'm going to put it into an 8x10 and get it printed out and put into a frame. I'm going to write it on the whiteboard. If you look behind me, you can see it on the whiteboard. And it's going to be everywhere so that it permeates my consciousness. Well, this is what she said. And I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Peter, this is for you. And it's super hot. I didn't put enough milk in it. And wow, my tongue's on fire. So anyways, this is what she said. She said there is a mind-body connection. And it could be that you are affecting these things. This was in our conversation. But it would be, she doesn't know exactly how you would get data on it. She doesn't know how by over a week, it would all be subjective. Would it be a psychological change? Would it be a genetic change? Would I be unlocking certain things inside my genes in order to initiate action? See, because when we think of DNA, we think of DNA as this static blueprint that things happen from. We look at DNA as only having a role in passing, the passage of information from the parent to the offspring. But that's actually, I didn't know this. It plays an active role in your day-to-day life. It is the software behind the machine. It's the program that runs in the background that gets everything done. And the interaction between what's called DNA and RNA are constantly changing things. Like one of the things that is kind of controversial. Well, I don't know if it's controversial, but basically you can alter DNA through radiological and chemical means automatically. Boom. Meaning putting non-organic things into your body or exposing an organism to radiation. So with that in mind, when you inject or you take meth or heroin or cocaine, you physically alter the DNA. So that changes your DNA so that theoretically, from the moment you take it, there is a change made to your DNA structure. And that DNA change gets passed on to each regenerated cell. So I don't know. That's interesting. So if you can do that chemically and you can do that radiologically, you might be able to do that chemically internally, because basically that's all we are, is a bunch of chemical machines. Each cell is taking it. So I'm getting way off on a tangent. So basically what I'm trying to say is, she doesn't know if there's any way to measure it. There would be, yes, a subjective change. But she doesn't know, if there's a way to know if the DNA is doing it, or if I'm just making this behavioral change within myself. But she said it's fine. It's good. If it makes your life better, then it's absolutely worthwhile. But what's funny is last night, I think around midnight, our time, I got a text from her, and she sent me a link to a study on the whole subject. So I'll update you. Next week is actually the the end of the experiment, and we're going to see if I actually lost any weight. I know I've changed a bunch of my behaviors, and I don't know if I've changed them because of the HHLM thing, or if I've just really wanted to just change my behavior. So again, like she said, it's subjective. Now, why is all this important? Why is it important to 12 cities in Israel? What does this have to do with Israel? Well, what's cool about this is that she is a genetic researcher. She's, I think it's 4 genes, or maybe it's more. She's discovered them. There is all this biological, biomechanical, biochemical, biological research being done. One, I know it's being done at Ben Gurion University in the Negev. I also know that it's being done up in Haifa. I think it's being done at Technion, or it might be being done at the University of Haifa. Tel Aviv University, all of these different universities. There is a physical spirit that sounds hokey. Whatever. There's this spirit of ingenuity, science, and innovation that is going on, and I'm actually kind of just I have personal things that I almost said I have personal issues. I have personal questions that I have that the innovative wealth that is Israel has that I can use as a resource. That was the weirdest sentence, but it made sense. I pulled it out at the end. So, all right. So what this all ties into is something that I'm kind of working on in the background with 12 cities in Israel. There are a couple of things I'm working on, and I'm lucky because I do have resources like Professor Carmi and the people at Ben Gurion University and a bunch of other people, because I had this idea. I was doing this episode on the Olympics, Israel and the Olympics, and what Israel's placings are and showings are at the Olympics, and what we're involved in, what sports we take part in. And we don't really take I want to say we don't really take part in a lot of them. We do take part in a lot of them, but we don't really get to the show, so to speak. And I started to look at why that happens. And what I found was in Israel, there is an extremely centralized structure, for localized, actually centralized and localized structure for athletics in Israel. Now, this goes back to, it's interesting. It's really fascinating because culturally it says so much. So it goes back to prior to the state. There were a lot of, this is going to sound like it's not related, but it is related. So prior to the state, you had Bundists, socialists, workers groups, all these things, and they moved from Eastern Europe. These Jews moved from Eastern Europe to Israel, and they set up these collectives. Well, these collectives were the kibbutzim, and all the farms that people worked to be chalutzim, pioneers. Now, one of the concepts in Judaism from that time was maskilim, and that's to be the physical strong specimen of a Jew, to counter what was seen as, at the time, the weak Jew who is pushed around by the governments of Europe, the people of Europe. So they wanted to reinvent themselves. Not reinvent themselves, because there were always these masculine, strong Jews. Not just masculine, but masculine. These strong, headstrong, powerful in stature and in mind, men and women who were just at the mercy of sometimes anti-Semitic governments in Europe, and sometimes just freaking oppressive governments in Europe that didn't matter if you were Jewish or not, you were going to be oppressed, like Tsarist Russia. One of the things that's noted often with Tsarist Russia is how anti-Semitic it was, but it really wasn't good to be a peasant in Russia either. So it was a lot that we shared. So what happened was this: you had to have work, and you also had to have an expressive time, both either physically, artistically, or whatnot. So a lot of art flourished in pre-state Israel, and a lot of sport with what were called Hapoalim. And Hapoalim were these sports clubs, which is interesting because these sports clubs are a lot like the European sports clubs of the mid to late 19th century. So basically what they were town sports clubs, kibbutzim sports clubs. And one of them is Hapoel Be'er Sheva. What? I love them. They're Be'er Sheva Sport Club. Now, Hapoel Be'er Sheva has soccer, it has basketball, and it has a bunch of other things. But as far as sporting programs, that's about as far as you can go. They have something else called the Wingate Center for those who excel, and that's in Netanya, and they also have the Olympic Center in Tel Aviv. And those are the two major training centers. The thing about those two major training centers, and I understand it's a small country, it's only 8 million people, roughly. But that's 8 million people, okay? That's a lot of people. If you go to New Jersey, which Israel's often, what do they say? Israel is often compared to New Jersey in size and population. New Jersey has a ton of sports facilities. That place is packed with sports facilities. That place has opportunities for you to get into a program and go up. It also has numerous universities, just like Israel does. And if New Jersey was a country, New Jersey would take from all of those sports facilities, and individual training, like in the United States. Let's expand it a little bit. In the United States, individuals train in their home places, like in Boston or San Francisco or Austin, Texas, or Chicago, and then they come to the larger training center. That doesn't exist in Israel. All they have is the larger training center. So there are only so many spaces. So my idea is to build an athletic center of the Negev. And you're going to be hearing a lot about sport in Israel over the next couple of years with me, because I'm obsessed with it. I just watched what was it, the NBA playoffs. Go Miami. The Heat took it in 5. So psyched. They move on to the next round. But I'm obsessed with sport. My friend Moti, who lives in Be'er Sheva, he's a soccer coach. Him and we are obsessed with sport, and I want to do something with Israel, with sport, with culture, with all of it, and I just want to wrap it all up into one nice, neat ball. Now, the sports center that I'm thinking about, and the reason why I spend so much time thinking about the psychology behind it and the psychology of behavioral change, is because of all this. It's where the root of it comes from. And I do tie it into Israel. So if you're thinking, well, dude, what you're talking about sounds like a personal journey, don't worry. I can make it relate. I'm going to have another sip of coffee. Hold on just one sec. All right. So where am I going with all this? So yes, the sports center that I envision is going to be in Be'er Sheva. Be'er Sheva has a number of tertiary communities, and it's going to be open to those communities. I want it to have a full Olympic-sized swimming pool, a full gymnastics center for boys and girls, men and women. I want it to have an indoor, I think, 2 or 3 pitch soccer what is it? I wanted to have an indoor soccer. What do you call that? Pitch, indoor pitches. Yes, like 3 indoor pitches. I also want to have an outdoor pitch, and around that outdoor soccer pitch, I want to have full lanes for track, field, all of that. I also on site want to have hiccup from the coffee. Also want to have a basketball court, full-size basketball court. Basketball is huge in Israel and is huge with me. So I need a place where I can occupy my time. So I wanted to cover all of these sports. I wanted to cover soccer, running and track. I wanted to cover gymnastics. I wanted to cover swimming, and competitive swimming. And I wanted to have a basketball court. We can also have on that basketball, in the gymnasium, we can also have volleyball, women's and girls volleyball. I want Israel to compete, and I want to pull from that amazing pool of amazing potential Israeli athletes. The other thing I want on site is a full sports physio suite and a full sports psychology suite, a full cafeteria, and also like 100-bed dormitory, as well as cottages for coaches, parents, whatnot. And that's what I'd like. And that's where all of this comes from. And that's where my obsession with sport comes from. That's where my obsession with fitness comes from. I also wanted to have a full gym on site. I also wanted to have a pro shop where if you come to the athletic center of the Negev, you can get anything for any of the sports that we do. And we're also going to have programs with the community so that no kid ever has to say, I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. And yeah, so I told you it was going to wrap into itself. All right. Lastly, let me wind up wrapping this whole thing up with, as I said, 12 Cities in Israel is about Israel. It's a cultural, it's a cultural mission that I have. And one of those ways to immerse yourself in Israeli culture is through the flashcards that we're developing. I want you to head on over to our 12 Cities in Israel, Instagram page. You can see all the cards there, or you can go to the new page, 12 Cities Hebrew, which is set up for to show you all of the cards and everything that we're doing. Also, the Facebook community page. Over the next week, I'm going to be doing a brand new video, sort of to get people excited about the Kickstarter campaign that's coming up that we're going to finance this with. And this brand new system of teaching people the basics in Hebrew is absolutely groundbreaking. We're going to have a Aleph Bet set. We're going to have a number set. We're going to have a 500 must-have words based on the 500 words in language that if you have them, you can communicate effectively. We're going to have a flashcard deck with verbs. We're going to have another flashcard deck with just nouns, things in Israel. And then we're going to have a final deck of Hebrew phrases. And I want you to be on the lookout for that. We're going to have that video coming out. I'm going to sit down. We're going to do it right here. Hit the lights and all that stuff. And yeah, so thank you. That's pretty much it. I know it was a rambling one, guys, but I did get to an eventual point. And Professor Carmi, thank you so much for helping me out to get my stuff straight, so that I knew whether or not I was doing the right thing. I really appreciate it. All right, that's it. If you want to follow this podcast on, if you want to download this podcast, you can do it on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get in the loop for all brand new episodes. All right, that's it. תודה רבה. להתראות ויאללה ביי.
הכחול שבעיניה, החיוך כובש בחם, הרכות בשפתותיה.
אין כמוה, אין כמוה, אין כמוה בעולם. אין כמוה, אין כמוה, אין כמוה בעולם.
היא אחת ויחידה, בכל זאת לבדה, אין אחד שבא אליה לבקש את ידה.
ובתסוגר עליה בליבה חתום, נעול, סגור, שבור.
לחישה בלילה והיא איננה, גם שרחוקה היא ממני.
זיכרונה עולה שוב בליבי הלילה, איך אותה רציתי כל חיי.